So again, remember, take it a sentence at a time, start with one of the phrases, then figure out the next sentence, and then just build from there. Don't overstress the creative writing aspect. Okay. Color for this term is goldenrod. So when you start, last term it was Pepto-Bismol pink. This term it's goldenrod. So anytime you're looking for stuff for this class, you're going to want to look for this color. Okay. We've got less than a minute, and we know that the timer is not always 100% accurate. So that minute could be like 30 seconds, or it could be a very long minute. So just all right, okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to take your week 1 Mustang minutes, And I cannot remember, did we only have 3 last week or did we have 4? We had 4, right? Okay, perfect, so it is out of 22. So make sure it's out of 22, so just put blank / 22. Make sure that you've got the dates written on there for all the days so that you can get that extra 2 points and that your name is on it, that it also says term 2, week 2. Make sure that's on there as well. And then something that one of the other classes they've started to do that I thought was really cool, which you guys don't have to, but I think it saves the people behind you. The first person in each row double checks to make sure everyone has their name on it before they pass them over. So I think that's a pretty nice thing. Now we're going to be changing seats, so hopefully tomorrow. So we'll, you know, if you're new to the front, just don't want to check. Okay, pass them over. Pass them over. And then could you put them in on the table and not in the basket, please?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Perfect. Perfect. All right, so we are done with today's Mustang Minute. And I want us to start pondering this question for a second. So we're going to start just with a quick little discussion. Your notes are 3-hole punched so that they can go into your English folder, okay? We are going to be using these notes this term as we do informational writing, and then we're going to use them again next term when we do argumentative writing, okay? Because this process that we're going to talk about today works for both, all right? Okay, so what do you guys think of when you hear the words writing on demand? What do you guys think of when you hear the words writing on demand? Haley?
I just think there's no prompt. You just write whatever you want.
Okay, so no prompt, no direction, just write now. Right now. Okay, that's fine. Funny English Monday morning joke. Okay, what else do you guys think of when you hear writing on demand? What do we think of when we hear the word writing on demand? Ethan?
Whenever someone asks you to write something down, always write.
Okay, good. So it has a lot to do with preparation, right? That you are always prepared no matter the situation. Okay? What does writing on demand mean, and how exactly can you produce good writing that has to be done on demand? How can you be expected to produce good writing if it's asked to be done on demand? What do you guys think? Can it be done? Katie, that was fairly emphatic. Why?
Because if you're prepared, then you can write really well.
Okay, so if you're prepared, you can write really well. Okay, let me ask you guys a question. Sage test, writing. That is writing on demand. Did anybody feel like that was their best stellar writing ever? Okay. Now, here's the thing. That, when we say writing on demand, that's what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about those writing prompts that you receive where you have very little preparation other than skills-based preparation, right? You don't know what types of prompts or what kind of information is going to be on that test, okay? The only thing you have are the skills or strategies that you already know to attack a prompt like that, okay? So when we talk writing on demand, we're going to talk about a couple different strategies that we can use to make sure that it happens well, okay, that it's effective. All right, so up at the top we've got what exactly is writing on demand, so we're going to add a couple little notes in there. Okay, so we live in a world with high-stakes testing, the workplace. I mean, all of you at some point in your lives are going to have a boss show up and say, I need you to write blah, blank, whatever. And you're going to need to be able to produce a piece of writing or some sort of information for your boss, Okay? The thing is will it always be argumentative writing? No, in fact, most of the time when I think about real life situations, it's usually informative. You're trying to inform someone about something, right? So maybe you're trying to inform a client about the progress of a project. Or maybe you're trying to inform someone about, something that you're working on, or, a new thing that you're trying, okay? So, writing on demand. Writing on demand has to do with 3 specific things. Writing to a specific prompt or a specific activity. Okay, sorry, I'll let you catch up. Okay, remember to paraphrase, summarize, put it into your own words. Okay? Writing in a narrow window of time, because there's always a time constraint. And third, meeting a specific set of requirements based on the prompt and the time. Okay? So there's usually very specific requirements that you're expected to meet. All right? And that is essentially writing on demand. So how many of you have done writing on demand before? Should be all of you, right? All of you have had teachers hand you something and say, write me an essay. And you're like, okay? So we've all done it, but now the question is, how can we prepare ourselves so that that actually becomes good writing? Okay? Because I think most of us, if we can spend a couple days, we feel more comfortable with our writing, don't we? But when you only have 2 hours, and that's like generous, we've really got to learn to pick up our strategies for making sure we can do this. Okay? All right, so very few of us create our best writing when we're put on the spot. Because how many of you, the second someone says, do it now, do it right now, your brain goes blank. And you start to panic. And you're like, right? And then nothing comes, and then you've wasted 20 minutes trying to figure out where to start. Am I preaching to the choir? Okay. So, there are some things that we can do right off the bat to make sure that we do well. Okay? Alright, so the very first thing we're going to do is to remember spam. Okay, this term and next term, I kind of overload on the acronyms. I love me some acronyms. Okay? So the very first thing, a lot of kids think the very first thing you should do after you've read the prompt is start writing. Okay? My number one thing I recommend is no, don't. If you want to make sure you avoid your writer's block and also make sure that you write everything you're supposed to, the very first thing you want to do is pick apart the prompt. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're literally going to look at the prompt. So we're going to analyze the prompt, analyze that little paragraph telling us what to write. And we're going to find the situation. Okay, so S in spam is situation. This is the event that causes you to need to write. Most of the time it's fake, right? You are pretending that you are a scientist, or you are, trying to convince the school board to not have uniforms, or why is it always uniforms? I don't know. Have you never noticed it's always uniforms? Okay. Or improving school lunch. Okay. This is those seem to be the go-tos, when they got nothing else. Although last year I noticed a lot of them about animals on the informational section. You got an octopus, a panda. You got a panda. You lucked out. I had a couple kids get like squirrels. Which one would you rather have? It was a horse, for a pet. It was a horse, a dog, or something else. And it was yeah, because you sit there and go, let me compare a horse to a dog if I want a pet. I don't know. Okay, whatever. P is the purpose. P is purpose. The reason that you're writing. Sometimes this is direct. They actually will tell you. Okay? Other times it's implied, okay? Other times it's very implied. There are only 3 types, okay? There is informational, narrative, and what's the third? Argumentative. That's really kind of about it. So are they asking you to persuade, to narrate, to respond? Okay, that is what it is. And so you're going to be looking for those keywords that tell you what style. Okay? Audience. The person or people you're pretending to write to. Okay? Now the interesting things, how many of you have ever read a prompt and it didn't have an audience? Like, or at least what you didn't think was an audience. Okay? So it doesn't say something like the school board or whatever. And so we're going to show you guys what the default is. Okay, because there's always a default. And mode. This is the type of writing that you are to do. Okay, so we have things like letters, articles, editorials, speeches. What other types of modes might they ask you to do? Essay, yeah, absolutely. I've even had kids do like one student, it was in the form of like an encyclopedia entry, like they were supposed to write as if they were writing an encyclopedia entry. Okay, so that is the mode, okay, encyclopedia entry. Okay, all right, so let's go into each of these just a little further. Okay, so the S, situation. Okay, so the situation is the setting. And it's usually located in the first part of the prompt. Okay? It's usually located in the first part of the prompt. And it's often a situation that hasn't really happened to you. You have to pretend, which is, I think, the hardest part. Because you're like, I don't want to pretend. This is lame. Okay? You guys ever had that? And it's like, pretend that your school wants to ban blank. And you're like, no, I don't want to pretend. I don't like this game. Okay? It creates the need to write. So you need to ask yourself, one of the first, and I do want this question in there, like word for word. This question is super important. Okay? You're going to want to ask yourself, why are they asking me to write? Why are they asking me to write? Why are they asking me to write? Okay? Why are they asking me to write? Wherefore writest thou? Why are they asking me to write? Okay. All right, let's talk purpose. The writing prompt is going to ask you to respond to the text using a main idea and supporting details. Okay? So when we respond to the prompt and the text, because one of the things that we very rarely ever do anymore is just write, right? What do they now give you when you guys take these new types of tests? What do they give you? Mia? They give you, yeah, they give you a computer. What else do they usually give you? Do they just give you the prompt? What have they started to give you? What did they give you last year? Give you a dictionary. What else?
Oh, sources.
Sources. Okay, because we love you guys, but do you really know that much information? No, so usually what they're asking you to do is to respond to something that they want you to read, right? Isn't that real life? That's real life, okay? Whether it is informational or argumentative, you will almost never write something without sources or source material, okay? So when we are writing, we're looking and we're going to ask ourselves, okay, how am I supposed to write the information? Am I arguing or persuading? Okay, so let's remind ourselves. The audience as you solve problems and or convince them. Okay, so oftentimes they'll present you a problem and your job is to argue or convince someone to a specific solution. Okay, Sometimes they'll ask you to narrate. I have never seen that show up on the test, but it is one of the 3 writing styles that we are asked to teach you. So we do it at the end after we take the SAGE test, mostly because it's a lot more fun. And we just get to talk about ourselves for an entire term. Okay? Narrate something you saw, heard, smelled, tasted, touched, said, thought, did to make a point. You're going to tell a story to make a point. And the one that we're going to focus on for this term is to inform the audience about information that you have learned and read about or listened to. Okay? Please remember that listening to information is just as beneficial to you as having read it or learned it somewhere. Okay? Especially in the context of, like, we're going to do a lot of stuff with TED Talks this term. Okay, we're going to use TED Talks as information gathering and before we write something informational. Okay, so that's something where we've listened to it. Okay, all right, so to backtrack, what's the question for situation? What's the question we ask when we're trying to figure out the situation, Ethan?
Why are they asking me to write?
Why are they asking me to write? Okay, the purpose is what? Who thinks they can explain the purpose in layman terms? What's the easiest way to basically explain it? Mia? How am I supposed to write? And how many styles are there? 3, right? Argue, narrate, inform. That's all. Okay? Will they always be super specific? No, so sometimes we're going to have to look for keywords. All right? Which, P.S., flip your paper over. I gave you a list of essay keywords. I like giving you free stuff. Makes me feel good. Okay, let's talk audience. Audience and mode are the 2 easiest. When in doubt, do them first. Okay, when in doubt, do them first. So the audience, locate the audience in the prompt. You have to ask yourself, who am I writing to? Who is going to read this? Who am I writing to? Who is going to read this? Okay, so we have our first 2 questions. Why am I writing? What am I writing? Who am I writing to? Who's going to read this? Okay, now sometimes it's going to be an individual or a group. Sometimes it's going to be like, write a letter to your principal, or write a speech to the school board, or write I don't know, okay? Now, here's the thing. Remember how I said there's a default? There's always a default for audience and mode. If the audience isn't stated specifically, this is important. If the audience is not stated specifically, use the default. Okay? So kind of like on your computer where it always has like a default, which is usually Times New Roman 12-point font. No matter what you do, if you don't change it, that's always what it is. Okay? It is society as a whole or an academic audience / test graders. Okay? The stupid people who make you write this. I'm just kidding. Okay? So sometimes you have to go with the default. And yes, they're dumb. That's okay. You know you think it. I'm just saying it out loud. Okay? All right. Couple things we have to remember about the audience. Before you can even start writing, it's important to know the audience because you have to consider what the audience already knows, what they need to know, and what they might want to know. Okay? So this term, for example, we're actually going to pretend to take on a couple different hats. Okay? We're going to do informational science writing in English. We're going to do some informational history writing. Okay? We're going to do some informational mathematics writing. You're like, what? Come again? Okay? And you're like, what class is this? Okay? But basically this concept of, okay, if I am writing something scientific, but I'm writing it for second graders, is that going to be different than if I'm writing to a science fair? Like a science fair panel of judges? Extremely different. So you see how understanding your audience before you start is going to make a big difference? Okay? All right, now you're going to want to imagine what questions they might have for you about your writing and then answer them in your writing. All right? I promise we're almost done. Okay. Here we go, mode. Look at the prompt for mode and ask yourself, what style or format should my writing be in? Okay? So hopefully what you're starting to realize is when we analyze prompts, which we're going to practice tomorrow, I'm going to give you a bunch of prompts, and we're actually going to see if we can pick them apart for spam. Okay? You should be able to just ask yourself those questions. Okay? So look for the prompt in the look in the prompt for the mode. Sometimes they'll say things like write a letter. Okay? Sometimes they'll say write an article. Sometimes they'll say write a speech or an editorial. One of the new ones I saw is a brief. Like write a brief, which is a brief is essentially like a scientific summary of like a set of information. Okay, that was a new one I'd never seen before. Okay, so that was, or like a brochure, like what would pop up on an informational brochure about a particular subject. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, now, always make sure you follow the format. Okay, because if it's a letter, for example, how many of you have done letters before? Okay, what do all letters have in common? Dear whoever, they often have the body paragraphs, they have a closing. What's the closing? Yeah, from, sincerely, etc. Typically you're not going to write love to the test grader. You might, maybe it would make, warm the cockles of their cold dead hearts while they're grading your essays. I'm just kidding. And a signature. Okay? All right. When in doubt, because sometimes there will be no mode. Okay, if they don't specifically tell you what is your mode, if they don't tell you anything different, what is your mode? Essay. Okay? Usually 5 paragraphs, but not always. Okay? On the SAGE test, for example, if they say 2 to 3 paragraphs, give them 2 to 3. Don't stress it. Okay? Because I feel bad because sometimes I look and it's like 2 to 3 paragraphs and the kid's got like 6. And